The crystal wine glass shattered against the pristine kitchen tile, fragments sparkling under the pendant lights like tiny daggers. Eliza Mitchell stared at the mess, her hands trembling slightly as the red wine spread like blood across the floor. This wasn't just about the glass. It was about the words still hanging in the air, her mother's voice, honeyed with false praise. You know, if Connor hadn't pushed you to apply to that design program, none of this would have happened for you. As if the man who'd left her life 3 years ago deserved credit for everything she'd built. As if James, who stood beside her now, silently gathering the larger shards, didn't exist at all. Eliza Mitchell woke on the morning of her 3rd wedding anniversary with a knot of dread in her stomach. Not because of James, God, no. Her husband slept peacefully beside her, one arm draped across her waist, his breath warm against her neck. The dread came from knowing what day this was. Not just their anniversary, but the dinner they'd planned to celebrate it. The dinner her mother had insisted on attending. The dinner that would inevitably become another shrine to Connor Reynolds, the ex-boyfriend her mother couldn't stop canonizing. Morning, beautiful, James murmured, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. Happy anniversary. Eliza turned to face him, forcing the anxiety away to focus on the man who'd actually stood by her side through everything. Happy anniversary, she whispered back, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. James Mitchell was everything Connor hadn't been: patient, supportive, kind to his core. While Connor had been all flash and charm on the surface, James was solid ground. Real. Present. You're thinking about tonight, he said, not a question. Those hazel eyes saw everything. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be. She sighed, resting her forehead against his. Today should be about us. It is about us. James ran his fingers through her chestnut hair. Whatever happens at dinner, whatever your mother says, it doesn't change what we've built. Eliza nodded, wishing she could believe it completely. The problem wasn't that her mother's words could change their relationship. It was that those words revealed something broken in Eliza's family that she couldn't seem to fix. Something that cast a shadow over every celebration, every milestone. They spent the morning in a bubble of happiness, exchanging gifts over coffee in their sunlit kitchen. James had designed a custom bookshelf for her office, so your design magazines stopped migrating to every surface in the house, he teased. She'd commissioned a painting of the mountain view from where they'd had their first kiss. They made love slowly, luxuriously, as morning light streamed through the curtains and Eliza managed to forget about the evening ahead. But as the hours ticked by, she found herself standing in front of her closet, anxiety creeping back as she tried to decide what to wear to her own anniversary dinner. Something confident, but not flashy. Something that said successful without seeming like she was trying too hard. Something her mother couldn't criticize. Wear the blue dress, James said from the doorway. The one you wore to the Henderson Project reveal. You think? She pulled out the sapphire sheath dress with its architectural neckline. It was her own design, something she'd created during the darkest period after Connor left, when she'd channeled her pain into creativity. I know. You light up in that dress. His smile was gentle. And it's your work, not his, not mine. Just yours. Eliza nodded, grateful for his understanding without needing to explain. James always understood. The dress felt like armor as she slipped it on, like a declaration. By the time they arrived at Lavinia's, the upscale restaurant James had chosen for their celebration, Eliza had almost convinced herself the evening might go well. The space was intimate, with soft lighting and tucked-away booths offering privacy. James had reserved a quiet corner table, and they arrived early to settle in before her mother appeared. I've arranged for champagne, James told her, squeezing her hand. And I asked them to bring it out right away. Might help take the edge off. Are we that obvious? Eliza asked, smoothing her napkin. Only to me. He kissed her knuckles. You've been chewing your lips since we left the apartment. Eliza forced herself to relax her mouth, tasting blood where she'd worn the skin raw. I just wish, she stopped as the sommelier approached with the champagne. I wish things could be simple. The bubbles were still rising in their glasses when Diane Harper swept into the restaurant, drawing eyes as she always did. At 63, she remained striking, tall, and elegant, her silver-streaked blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, her clothes expensive, but understated in that way that paradoxically screamed money. She spotted them immediately, her face lighting with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "There's my brilliant girl," she called, too loudly for the hushed atmosphere. Heads turned. Eliza felt herself shrinking slightly before forcing her spine straight. Diane air-kissed both her cheeks before offering a perfunctory hug to James. And James, looking handsome as always. "Mom." Eliza accepted the greeting. "Thanks for coming. I wouldn't miss celebrating my daughter's success." Diane settled into her chair, immediately signaling for a waiter. "Though I still think we should have gone to Maison. You know they're featuring Connor's brothers' wines this season? Such a talented family." And there it was, the first mention of Connor, not 5 minutes into the evening. James caught Eliza's eye briefly before turning his attention to pouring champagne for Diane. His face revealed nothing, but Eliza knew the careful blankness masked hurt. "We wanted something intimate," Eliza said, keeping her voice light. "James made the reservation months ago." "How thoughtful." Diane's tone held a note of dismissal, though you know Connor always said Lavinia's was overrated. Eliza took a long sip of champagne, feeling it burn down her throat. Connor had never actually been to Lavinia's, it had opened after they'd broken up, but her mother had built such an elaborate mythology around him that she probably believed her own revisions of history. Dinner proceeded with the tense choreography of a dance everyone knew, but no one enjoyed. The food was exceptional. Seared scallops, followed by duck breast with cherry reduction, paired with wines James had selected with care. Eliza tried to steer the conversation toward neutral topics, her mother's garden club, James's latest architectural project, an upcoming gallery opening they planned to attend. But Diane inevitably circled back to Connor like a compass needle finding north. "Did I tell you Connor's firm just landed the redesign for the Westbrook hotel chain?" she asked, cutting into her duck with surgical precision. "No," Eliza said flatly. "How would you know that?" "Oh, his mother and I still have lunch occasionally." "She's so proud of him." Diane smiled, oblivious to the tension. "Not that I'm not proud of you too, sweetheart. That little boutique hotel you did the interiors for last year was lovely. Very accessible." Eliza felt heat rising to her face. The little boutique hotel had been featured in Architectural Digest and had put her design firm on the map nationally. It had been the culmination of 2 years of work, during which James had taken on extra projects to help keep their finances stable while she focused on building her portfolio. "The Harlington wasn't just lovely, Mom. It won the Berman Award." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "And it wasn't little, it was a $40 million project." "Of course, darling, I didn't mean to minimize it." Diane patted her hand as though soothing a child. "I just meant it's a different scale than what Connor works on." "But then, he always pushed you to think bigger, didn't he? I remember how he used to say you could be truly exceptional if you'd just take more risks." Eliza felt James go still beside her. That particular barb cut deep, twisting the knife in an old wound. Connor had indeed said those words, but not as encouragement, as criticism. He'd said them during arguments, throwing them at her when her cautious approach to building her career didn't align with his vision of being partnered with an instant design star. "James was the one who encouraged me to take on the Harlington when I was hesitant," Eliza said quietly. "He's the one who believed in me when that project seemed too big." "Well, yes, I'm sure James has been very supportive." Diane's tone was dismissive. "But you and I both know you wouldn't even be a designer if Connor hadn't pushed you to go back to school. Remember how stuck you were in that dead-end job at the publishing house? He saw your potential." The waiter arrived with dessert, a delicate chocolate soufflé with raspberry coulis, momentarily pausing the conversation. Eliza used the interruption to take a deep breath, feeling James's hand find hers under the table. "Actually, Mom," she said once the waiter had departed, "Connor didn't want me to go back to school. He thought it was a waste of money." The truth burned her throat more than the champagne had. "He said if I hadn't made it in design by 25, I never would." Diane's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That's not how I remember it." "I know it's not." Eliza set down her own utensils. But that's what happened. He hated that I wanted to start over in a new field. He said I'd fail. James's thumb traced circles on her palm, silent support as she finally spoke truths she'd kept buried. Not because they were secrets, James knew everything, but because confronting her mother's distorted narrative had always seemed too exhausting to attempt. Well, Diane recovered quickly. Perhaps I've misremembered some details. But he was always so proud of your talent. He told me himself, just last Christmas when I ran into him at the Williamsons' party. Eliza stared at her mother. You saw Connor at Christmas? Just in passing, dear. The Williamsons always invite half the city to their holiday gathering. Diane waved a hand dismissively. He asked about you, of course. Said he wasn't surprised at all by your success. That he always knew you had it in you, if you'd just believe in yourself the way he believed in you. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Eliza could feel her pulse in her fingertips, in her temples. You discussed me with my ex-boyfriend? On Christmas? Don't be dramatic, Eliza. Diane's voice took on the steel edge that had always signaled dangerous territory when Eliza was growing up. It was a casual conversation between old acquaintances. Connor was practically family for 5 years. And James has been my actual family for 3 years. Eliza's voice was low, intense. Yet somehow you can't seem to acknowledge his role in my life or my career. That's not fair. I've always been perfectly cordial to James. Cordial. Eliza felt something crack inside her, a dam holding back years of frustration. Yes, you're cordial to my husband. You're warm, effusive, and adoring to my ex, who, by the way, cheated on me with his assistant. The same ex who told me I'd never make it as a designer because I lacked the killer instinct. The same ex who borrowed $10,000 from me to invest in his friend's startup and never paid it back. James's hand tightened on hers in warning, but Eliza couldn't stop now. Years of swallowed hurt were rising like bile. Do you know who sat with me while I cried when I found out about the cheating? Who helped me move out of our shared apartment when Connor was conveniently at a conference so he wouldn't have to face me? Who encouraged me to finally pursue the design career I'd always dreamed of, even though it meant years of financial struggle? She was trembling now, but her voice remained controlled. It wasn't Connor. It was James. Always James. Diane's face had paled, her lips pressed into a thin line. I had no idea Connor had been unfaithful. You never told me. I tried to tell you. You changed the subject. You said there must have been misunderstandings on both sides. The memory still stung. And after a while, it just seemed easier to let you believe whatever version of Connor you wanted to believe in. I never meant to, Diane began, then stopped, looking genuinely bewildered. He just always spoke so highly of you, of your talent. I thought he was the one who saw your potential first. He saw my potential as an accessory to his ambitions. Eliza's voice softened slightly, seeing genuine confusion in her mother's eyes. Mom, Connor was charming and ambitious, and yes, he could be generous when it served him. But he didn't support me, not really. He liked the idea of me, the image we presented together. When things got hard, when I needed actual support, he wasn't there. Silence fell over the table. James remained quiet, his presence solid beside her. This wasn't his battle to fight, though he'd offered many times. This was something Eliza needed to resolve herself. Diane set down her fork with a small clink against the fine china. I'm sorry if I've given the impression that I don't value James, she said finally, addressing him directly for perhaps the first time that evening. That was never my intention. It's not about me, James said quietly. It's about recognizing who Eliza really is and what she's accomplished on her own terms. I don't understand why you're both so upset. Diane reached for her water glass, her hand showing a slight tremor. I've only ever wanted to acknowledge the people who helped shape Eliza's success. That's not a criticism of your marriage. But it is, Mom. Eliza leaned forward. Every time you credit Connor for my achievements, you're erasing my own agency and dismissing James's support. You're rewriting my history to fit some narrative where Connor is the hero, when the reality is that he nearly derailed my career before it began. The waiter approached with the bill, sensing the tension and making himself scarce again quickly. James reached for it, but Eliza placed her hand over his and took it instead. I've got this. It's my turn to treat you. That small exchange seemed to penetrate Diane's defenses in a way nothing else had. She watched them, saw the partnership in that simple interaction, the easy give and take between them. He really hurt you, didn't he? She said suddenly, looking at Eliza with new eyes. Connor, I mean. Eliza felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Yes, he did. And I've been bringing him up constantly. Diane's voice held a note of genuine realization. Praising him to you. In front of your husband. On your anniversary. Yes. Eliza couldn't manage more than that single syllable. Diane closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted in her expression. I owe you both an apology. A real one, not a defensive one. She reached across the table, tentatively touching Eliza's wrist. I think I wanted to believe Connor was good for you because I introduced you. He was charming to me, attentive in the way I thought a good partner should be. If he was bad for you, what does that say about my judgment? About my ability to want the best for my daughter? The raw honesty in her mother's voice caught Eliza off guard. Diane Harper didn't do vulnerability, not ever. Mom, your judgment wasn't bad because you liked Connor. A lot of people liked Connor. He's very good at making people like him. Eliza sighed. But at some point, you have to see people for who they really are, not who you want them to be. I think I didn't want to hear the truth because it meant admitting I'd pushed you toward someone who hurt you. Diane's voice was soft, almost fragile. And then when you found happiness with James, I couldn't fully embrace it because it meant facing my own failure. James cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Harper. Diane. We all make mistakes in judging character. What matters is being willing to revise our opinions based on new information. Diane studied him for a long moment. You're very gracious, considering how I've treated you. I love your daughter, he said simply. Everything else is secondary. Something in the straightforward declaration seemed to finally break through. Diane's eyes filled with tears, a sight so unexpected that Eliza couldn't immediately process it. Her mother didn't cry. Diane Harper managed emotions. She didn't display them. I've been terrible, haven't I? Diane whispered. Not terrible. Eliza found herself softening despite the hurt that still pulsed beneath her ribs. Just blinded by your own narrative. We all do it sometimes. Not like this. Diane straightened her shoulders, visibly collecting herself. Not for years, to the point of hurting the people we love. She reached for her purse, extracting a credit card. Please, let me pay for dinner. It's the very least I can do. Mom, it's our anniversary dinner. Exactly. It's your celebration, which I've already dampened enough. She placed the card atop the bill with firm resolution. Consider it the first small step in making amends. Eliza glanced at James, who gave a slight nod. All right, she agreed. Thank you. As they waited for the waiter to process the payment, an awkward silence settled over the table. Years of patterns don't break in a single conversation, no matter how revelatory. Eliza knew this was just the beginning of whatever new relationship might be possible with her mother. I have a proposal, Diane said suddenly. If you're willing to hear it. Eliza nodded cautiously. I'd like to come see your studio. Your current projects. I realize I've never actually visited your professional space. Diane's voice held a new note of humility. I'd like to understand your work through your eyes, not filtered through preconceptions. The request was so unexpected, so precisely what Eliza had longed for without ever articulating, that she felt momentarily speechless. I'd like that, she managed finally. Maybe next week? Next week would be perfect. Diane signed the receipt that the waiter had discreetly placed on the table. And perhaps afterward, we could have lunch. Just us. I'd like that too. They walked out into the cool evening air together, the awkwardness between them now tinged with possibility rather than resentment. When they reached the sidewalk, Diane turned to James. Thank you, she said, for loving my daughter better than I've understood. I hope you'll give me the chance to know you, the real you, without my biases in the way. James nodded, his arm around Eliza's waist. I'd welcome that. Diane surprised them both by embracing James briefly, then Eliza. "Happy anniversary," she said. "I hope there are many more." After Diane had gone, Eliza and James walked slowly through the city streets toward home, her heels clicking on the pavement, his arms steady around her. "Are you okay?" he asked when they were a few blocks from the restaurant. "I think so." Eliza leaned into him. "I never expected her to actually hear me. Sometimes people surprise us." James kissed her temple. "Sometimes they even change." "Do you think she meant it?" "About wanting to see my work, to really understand." "I think she wanted to. Whether she follows through." He shrugged. "That's up to her. But you said your piece, Eliza. You stood up for yourself, for us. That matters regardless of what she does next." They reached their building, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and massive windows that had first captured their imagination 3 years earlier. As James unlocked the door to their loft, Eliza felt a curious lightness, as though she'd set down a burden she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten the weight of it. Inside, their space welcomed them, walls adorned with art they'd collected together, furniture bearing the marks of their shared life, plants thriving in the natural light they both loved. It wasn't perfect, nothing real ever is. But it was theirs, built on truth and mutual support, not illusions. James disappeared into the kitchen, returning with the bottle of special reserve scotch they saved for significant occasions. He poured 2 fingers into each of 2 crystal tumblers, wedding gifts from his parents, and handed one to her. "To my extraordinary wife," he said, raising his glass, "who fights her own battles and designs her own destiny." "And to my husband," she countered, "who never needs the spotlight to show his strength." They drank, the smoky liquid warming Eliza from within. Setting down her glass, she slipped her arms around James's neck, studying the face that had become her true north. Not because he had all the answers or solved all her problems, but because he stood beside her while she found her own solutions. "I'm sorry the dinner wasn't the celebration we planned," she murmured. "Are you kidding?" James's eyes crinkled at the corners. "That was the best anniversary gift you could have given me. A tense family confrontation? You standing in your power, claiming your story." His hands settled at her waist. "I've watched you accommodate your mother's version of reality for 3 years, Eliza. Watching you finally draw that line? That's better than any wrapped present." Eliza laughed, resting her forehead against his chest. "You're very strange, you know that? But you love me anyway." He tilted her chin up, eyes serious now. "I'm proud of you. That took courage. I should have done it years ago. For both of us. You did it when you were ready." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "That's how healing works. It happens on its own schedule." Eliza kissed him then, a slow, deep kiss that carried all the words she couldn't quite articulate: gratitude, love, partnership in its truest form. When they parted, she knew with sudden clarity what she wanted to do next. "Come with me," she said, taking his hand and leading him toward their home office. "Where are we going?" "I want to show you something." In the office, she opened her portfolio on the large drafting table, flipping to the preliminary sketches for her newest project, a women's shelter reimagined as a space of dignity and hope rather than mere necessity. "This is the community space," she said, pointing to the central area in her design. "I've been struggling with it for weeks. Something wasn't clicking." She paused, looking up at him. "But tonight, listening to my mother, watching you, I realized what it needs." She picked up a pencil, quickly sketching in changes, opening the sightlines, creating zones that allowed for both privacy and connection, adding elements that honored both independence and community. "It needs to be a space where women can reclaim their narratives," she explained as she worked, the design flowing from her fingers with newfound certainty. "Where they can be seen for who they truly are, not who others want them to be." James watched her work, his face soft with admiration. "It's beautiful, Eliza. It's exactly right." She set down the pencil, surveying the transformed design. "I couldn't have gotten here without you. Not because you designed it for me, but because you created the space where I could find my own voice." She turned to face him fully. "That's what real support looks like. That's what my mother never understood about you, about us. Maybe she's starting to. James pulled her close. But even if she never fully gets it, we know what we've built. That's what matters. In the quiet of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life and individual achievements, Eliza felt the last shadows of old pain beginning to recede. The praise that had once eclipsed her truth was losing its power. She was standing in her own light now, not Connor's, not her mother's, not even James's. Her own. And that, perhaps, was the greatest anniversary gift of all.